Go. I think good to go ahead and get started. And
Okay,
a couple
cool.
more folks look like they're trickling in, but
That's fine.
um, yeah. So yeah, the floor is yours.
Oh, okay, great. Hi everyone. I don't know if I have anyone who was here this or who is here this morning but wasn't. I'm Father Nate. I'm a priest in Mishawaka, Indiana, about a stone's throw from the University of Notre Dame. And I am looking forward to being with you all in the flesh next week in the same room. So no technological problems next week. And I'll be with you all in person. And I'm really, really looking forward to worshiping together with you and to doing our final session together. Um, but the first order of business is somebody asked a question last week about the Magi. Is the person who asked that question around?
I do not believe he's here
Okay.
today.
Okay. Well, I did some research on the Magi. The question, if I remember correctly, was what were the gifts of the Magi in relation to what we were talking about last week, which was we were discussing what is a gift. And my turns out, this is not always the case, I promise, that my knee-jerk reaction to the question was actually pretty on the nose. So I did some research, and the gifts that the Magi were bringing to Christ were, in fact, counter gifts of gratitude. Um, so at a this is what I just put something quick a little bit together for you all. At a deeper theological level, the Magi's gifts can be read as humanity's symbolic return gift of God. Early Christians, interpreters like Irenaeus and Augustine, sometimes treat the Magi as representatives of the nations bringing their first fruits to the Gentiles. And in this sense, the act is a kind of grateful response to God's self-giving, even before they consciously understand the gift. So, turns out, accidentally, I was in the ballpark. But um, yeah, I digress. So if you see that come across the person who asked that question, you can tell them that the gift to the Magi is a counter gift of gratitude to God. Okay, with that, let's jump in. So, can you all you can see the PowerPoint, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And can you see my mug? Can you see my mug?
Yeah, you're right in front of the picture of the woman praying.
Oh, am I blocking her? That was not intentional. I'm very sorry to the woman. Um, okay, so last week we asked the question, what is a gift? And we explored how the meaning of gift giving has shifted from ancient reciprocal exchanges to modern notions of detached generosity. And what we saw is that historically, gifts created relationships through a circle of giving that begins with a giver giving a gift, someone receiving that gift, and offering a counter gift in gratitude. We also explored how gratitude is central to the Christian life, rooted in understanding all things as gifts from God. And we identified three divine gifts. The first one we explored was the doctrine of creation, specifically the creation out of nothing. We explored Christ's death and resurrection as divine gift. And the third was new creation and the gift of the Holy Spirit as a gift of God. And like I said last week, we could have explored other ones. We didn't explore the gift of Christ in the Eucharist, or the gift of the revelation of God in Scripture, or all a host of other gifts. We just explored just those three because I didn't want to go in too many directions. Though gifts, God's gives existence and redemption and renewal to humanity in the world through these three gifts that we explored. So true gratitude is not optional. but is defining human response that manifests through acts of love, service, and generosity, reflecting participation in God's ongoing creative and redemptive work. Next week, when I'm with you, we will explore how Christianity redefines this circle of gratitude by teaching that gratitude to God is expressed not in returning gifts directly to God, but through acts of love, service, and welcome to others. But this morning, what we are really going to do is we're really going to jump into this question, what is gratitude? And this week, we are going to be dealing with some pretty technical, historical, theological ideas. But as we explore these ideas this week, I hope it will become clearer how these big ideas can help in our everyday actions, how our understanding of gratitude can become acts of gratitude. And so I tried this analogy out with a few of my parishioners. And did you know that Latin, though a dead language now, was a language that was spoken pretty prominently throughout the most of history, and that it was in some ways the spiritual language of a number of people in the West. Um, when we think about learning Latin now, it's such a drag, right? You have to learn another language, and it's a dead language. No one even speaks it anymore. But Latin was the living language, the living spiritual language of a whole host of people. And though it's kind of got out of our vernacular, it was deeply spiritual to them. And so, in a sense, what I'm asking you all to do is to trust me as I'm teaching you this theological version of Latin, which has deep theological and spiritual resonances for us if we're willing to just kind of go there, to kind of put in the work. So we'll do a little bit of some technical stuff, but I really hope and I really think that deep spiritual work can be done in our hearts as we do it. So this morning I want to focus on three things about gratitude. The first, and this is just by way of reminder from last week, is that gratitude is a response. I think this is my next slide. Oops. Okay, there we go. Oh, sorry, this was my recap from last week, builds relationships. So the first thing, and this is just a recap from last week, is that gratitude is a response to some gift by a giver. Gratitude does not exist on its own. And the way we typically talk about gratitude these days is we typically think of it in terms of I'm getting sort of ahead of myself. To talk about gratitude is at least indirectly to think about the gift that was given. Okay, so that was just a refresher from last week. The second thing I want to note about gratitude is that where we today typically and primarily think of gratitude as an emotion, however, the tradition, the theological tradition that we are downstream of, has thought of gratitude as a virtue. So even now, we need to back up a second. What do we mean by a virtue? When we talk about virtue, we're talking about habits and choices that help people become truly good, to become their best selves. Virtues are habits that lead us to good actions and for the right reasons. They help us grow into our full potential, not only as humans, but also as spiritual beings created by God. Just like we learn to play an instrument. How many musicians do we have out there? I play a number of different instruments. When you learn to play an instrument, you start slowly, right? And as you practice, you get better and better and better at it. But you can't think about the violin and hope to be a violinist. You actually have to pick up the instrument and start to play it. And you develop habits of learning to play the instrument well. Virtues are sort of the moral equivalent of that. That as we do good actions, we build habits, we build virtues that drive us and bring us closer to our God's intended purpose for our lives and for who we are as human beings living amongst other people. Gratitude is a virtue. Gratitude is a habit, something that we get better at the more that we practice it, just like an instrument. One of the ways that the tradition has thought about virtues is to show how they are interconnected. So, um, within the tradition, there's three theological virtues. These are faith, hope, and love. Faith, hope, and charity. But connected to these are the cardinal virtues of practical reason, of justice, of temperance, and courage. These are cardinal virtues. And I don't typically like to do this kind of thing. When I preach, I typically don't like to do well, in the original language and, kind of nerd out in original languages and things. But actually, in this case, it's a little bit helpful. Cardinal virtues of practical reason, of justice, of temperance, and courage. They're called cardinal because the word cardinalis means hinge, like the hinge of a door. And so what they're called cardinal virtues because in some way, our ability to live a good and flourishing moral life hinges on our practicing and developing the habits of those cardinal virtues. But these cardinal virtues, these hinges, need help from other important virtues. Gratitude is a helper virtue for the cardinal virtue of justice. I'm going to say that again. Gratitude is a helper virtue for the cardinal virtue of justice. Some theologians have used the metaphor of the house to describe the relationship between helper virtues and the cardinal virtues. So helper virtues are like the walls and the beams that support the house. They are part of the structure. If justice is about giving to people what they are owed, gratitude fits under this because it involves recognizing and repaying kindness or goodness received by others. Even though gratitude is a smaller virtue, it plays a big role in helping understand justice. It teaches us how to give fairly and thankfully within relationships, teaching us to recognize our dependence on others. Just as an aside, another helper virtue of justice is a virtue called religio, which is where we get our word religion from. In the 13th century, theologians like Thomas Aquinas and others, religion was not the way that we think about it today, a set of standard beliefs that kind of all hang together and that we assent to. Religion, religio, was a virtue as a helper virtue of justice that when you habituate it, when you develop it, it's this recognition that we can never truly pay God back all that God has given us as a gift. That's actually the true meaning of religion, according to the 13th century. Now, of course, it shifts it shifts meaning when it gets into the Enlightenment area to the definition we know now. But religion was actually the virtue of recognizing that we are always in debt to a God who has given us everything. It was a virtue as a helper virtue to the virtue of justice. I find that just incredibly fascinating. But gratitude has a special place in our understanding of justice because it connects not only to human relations, but also to God. And gratitude isn't just a private feeling, it's also a social and even political virtue. A society that practices gratitude is one where people recognize their dependence on others, respect the gifts they have received, and work for justice in return. Gratitude reminds us that we are never completely self-made. Since God is the source of all goodness, every act of gratitude ultimately points back to God as the first giver. Remember last week, this goes back to the gift of God's creation to us. When we thank our parents, when we thank our teachers, when we thank our friends, we're also indirectly thanking the one who gave us life and who is the one who gives us all good things. And gratitude reminds us that we live in a web of relationships where we constantly receive more than we can repay. So this is justice out of gratitude. All right. One last point, and then we'll open it up for some questions. And then there's a few other things I want us to think about. So the third thing is, now I've already said that gratitude is, we typically think of it as an emotion, but the way the tradition has thought of it is in terms of a virtue. But that doesn't mean that we also don't feel gratitude. And so feeling gratitude is actually really significant as well. We tend today to think of gratitude strictly as an emotion. And I want to affirm that I think the gratitude is, in fact, we do feel gratitude. But here is how the emotional part fits within the virtue part. Being virtuous involves not only acting rightly, but also feeling rightly. We have to cultivate our feelings. So true virtue shapes both our choices and our emotions, how we feel. And gratitude is a great example of this. We don't just do gratitude, we feel gratitude. And sometimes we have to practice showing gratitude even when we don't feel, even when we don't feel like it, so that our virtue, our emotions can catch up with the virtuous habits that we have begun to cultivate. Over time, practicing thankfulness helps us develop a stable gratitude, grateful character. And in this way, small moments of gratitude build a long-term pattern of being grateful people. When gratitude guides our emotions, actions, and institutions, we move closer to living a kind of fully human and fully God and good life, which we are called to by God. Okay, so at this point, I'm just going to do a quick recap, and then I'm going to open it up for some comments. Um, First, I mentioned that gratitude does not exist in a vacuum. It always assumes some sort of giver, some that a gift has been given to us that we deem to be something to be thankful for, a good thing. And the second thing we just covered was that gratitude is a habit. It is a virtue that needs to be developed. Like playing an instrument, the more we practice it, the more we become excellent at it. If we want to become excellent at doing gratitude, of being gracious people, then we need to practice it. We need to go out of our way and do gracious and show gratitude in the world. And finally, even though it is a virtue, it is also an emotion. We can cultivate our emotions through doing gratitude to feel the right things at the right times when it comes to being thankful. Okay, with that, I want to open it up for questions. And then I have a little bit more, but I wanted to stop. And any clarifying questions at this stage? I know. So that's all the big medieval stuff. We're done with the medieval distinction. So go ahead and ask any follow-up questions that you'd like. Yeah,
We have
I
one
see.
question.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go
we
ahead,
have a
please.
question.
I wonder whether you can think of, or help us together think of examples of gratitude at the national level. I think you may have used that concept at some point, whether it's gratitude that's, I don't know whether do enough churches preach it so that Americans are thinking about expressing their gratitude, or the leaders are thinking about expressing their gratitude towards
Yeah.
the country for what it does. I wonder if we could think of some examples of that, because it would be nice to see, to figure out a way for there to be a greater amount of gratitude in just in daily life.
Yeah, so let me make sure I'm understanding your question, just because of the sound and stuff, and then we can open it up. You're asking if we can identify moments of collective or national gratitude, um, and how where we've seen it and maybe where we could get better at it. Is that kind of what you're hinting at?
Exactly right.
Yeah, okay. All right. What do y'all think?
I can't think of any example, did anybody ever say, country ever say, thank you for curing us of COVID or for not curing us?
Yeah.
Vaccine and saving so many lives. Did
Yeah.
we thank, I'm not suggesting it's something that is only in recent times we haven't been doing, but I can't think back in historic times either when we expressed
Yeah.
gratitude.
Thanksgiving Day.
Veterans Day. Yeah.
National Day of Gratitude for sure. So I'm gonna be snarky, and I'm sorry about this, but I'm gonna be just for a moment. This is not national, so not to that point. Do you know where the word Eucharist comes from?
A couple of people nodding, but nobody's saying anything.
Okay.
It's a Greek word.
The-
I mean, Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
Did you hear that?
yeah, yeah. It's a Greek word. It means to give thanks. I'm sorry, did I miss
It's
that
in
word?
it's in the bulletin. It's been in the bulletin for the last.
Oh! All right, all right. Well done. Well, you all are well prepped. Well done. So that's not a national thing. But that's a corporate Thanksgiving, that you all, whenever you partake of the blood and the body and blood of Christ, that is a bringing forth a giving thanks in a corporate way. Not necessarily the national way, and we should talk more about that because I'm just really fascinated by what you all would say. But there's at least one that corporate way of every single Sunday when we get together and we practice the Eucharist together, we are in fact worshiping God and saying thank you. And I think in some ways saying thank you for the very specific things that we covered last week, which is the fact that Christ died on the cross and was resurrected on the third day, and that we receive the gift of the Holy Spirit. So that's one thought. What else? You can do church or national life. I kind of opened it up for church, but yeah, I see a hand.
Look, I got one. When we receive, just to your point about Eucharist now, which is great. Kind of old church, and I mean like old church, like 28 prayer book or maybe earlier. The response to receiving the Eucharist wasn't Amen. It was thanks be to God.
Oh,
Our church here who do that. Old priest I knew from a way long time ago, old Southern gentleman. Do you remember a guy named Lauren Mead? Does that name ring a bell at all? He founded the Alban Institute. He'd come to church, he'd go, well, thanks be to God. I think that jumped in my mind. We talking about Eucharist and how we say Thanksgiving and how it's a gift from God.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the more recent language, but maybe we've sort of separated the thanks be to God from our just daily and weekly worship. So yeah, an excellent thought. To tilt my hand towards oh no, please, I see hands. Go ahead.
I think like sometimes it's hard when I was thinking about nationally,
Yeah.
there's a difference too between gratitude and honoring. Like I'm thinking back to Jimmy Carter's funeral and how they kind of went through his whole life and what he gave, not only as a president, but then after the fact. And sometimes I feel like we express gratitude when that experience or that person is gone.
Yeah.
More so than when it should be expressed during the life of that individual or during the action itself. I also think back to 9/11 when they, honored and thanked all of the first responders.
Yeah.
So I think, unfortunately, the gratitude has to happen when something tragic or something big happens, where I think we've lost the ability to express it, practice it in our more daily lives for the smaller things.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating and fantastic point. It's almost as if we need to be jarred out of our regular complacency in order for us to be like, oh my gosh, the world has dropped out from underneath me. Um, and then this is a fancy word called supererogatory, where there's someone who does something, some supererogatory act. They go above and beyond. And then we're like, oh my gosh, thank you. That's a fascinating and excellent point. And the circumstances of one's death.
I think
As
too,
be
it's just even as I have 4 kids and
Yeah.
they're amazing, and sometimes you don't fully appreciate them until you hear tragedy in somebody else, that it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm so grateful that my kids are doing what they're doing, they're happy, what have you. But it's
Yeah.
like I should be better at just feeling that gratitude on a more regular basis.
Yeah, again, it's just such a good point. I mean, and I guess the point, maybe bringing it back to the virtue discussion, is to say perhaps the best way to cultivate this on a daily basis is to continually make the world strange, to continually question and be thinking about different things in your life that maybe you've taken it for granted, but can say, in a moment when you've taken someone else's perspective or just thought about something a little differently, be like, wow, we have heaters in our house. Let's be thankful for central air, or here's another instance, maybe in the changing of the seasons. I'm looking outside as all the leaves are falling outside of my office, and like the world is changing, and the season changing might be an excellent opportunity to say not only thank you for the summer, but the beauty and majesty of the winter and the snow. I like snow. I know not everyone does. I like the winter. I think it's great. California boy who loves winter. That's got to be a cliche, but yeah.
We have one more hand.
What's that?
I just in referring to your comments about gratefulness and thankfulness and honor. And I think that our country we're all very reluctant, I think, to say thank you. And we have so much. But this current status of civility or lack of civility in our country makes it very difficult to express that. But I think the word honor really captures it, that we fail to honor so much about what is inherently good about our country and in the public. That we've lost sight of that, and we're afraid of each other to express that because of the political ramifications or implications.
Sure.
And that's such a major issue. I think it was a forum that we missed attending previously, but honor is, I think, probably, I would think it's another good substitute for the word thankfulness and gratitude.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say too much about that if I'm being just totally honest. I think you're onto something. I think this connection between honor and gratitude is right. Maybe this is one of those things that I go look up this week, and then when I'm with you, I can give you an answer. But I'll just say this week, and then maybe I'll say more about it next week. I'll do some homework for you, okay? When Seneca and Cicero, the ancient Roman philosophers, pre-Christian philosophers, when they talked about the counter gift, so what we were talking about last week, the gift, the giver, the gift, the counter gift. The counter gift was, it said that someone gives honors as gratitude, which makes me think that, at least for them, there's this distinction that honor is something that's given in the spirit of gratitude. Maybe that we give honor from a character, from a stance, from a place of gratitude. But yeah, I'm fascinated with your all's connection between honor and gratitude. I'll do some homework this week, and I'll have more to say about it for you all next week. Okay.
Two more hands.
Yeah, keep going. This is great.
It's not a question, it's just, I really appreciate the connection you made about the circle of gratitude as a virtue to the community, to our dependence on and support of each other. For me, that's what my faith is about. It's God showing up in the community. And I think that sometimes is at odds with, some of these very American themes of rugged individuality and
Yes.
individual responsibility and
Absolutely.
if we're being grateful, that's somehow weak or something. I don't know. I
Yeah.
think there's some connection in there, but I
Yeah.
really appreciated that that point that you made that
Yeah.
reminds us.
Well, let me give credit where credit is due. This is not my idea. I'm basically parroting back to just medieval theology and philosophy, most notably St. Thomas Aquinas. I wish I were as smart as St. Thomas, but I'm not. But I think there's a lesson to be learned from him that you have picked up on. This connection between gratitude and justice. When I first started studying this a couple of years ago, in 2021, really, I was just flabbergasted by that connection. I imagine in the same way that you are now. And that gratitude doesn't exist in a vacuum. It always is connected to some gift giver, someone who has given us something. And that it assumes that we're always in relationship. It assumes that we're always connected with someone else who is passing on and that we are passing on and they're receiving. And it really undermines this idea of the rugged individualism, as you say, the picking yourself up by your bootstraps. Like, I did this on my own. Gratitude is the remedy, potentially, of privilege. It's going to be really difficult for one to truly have privilege if one genuinely has gratitude or has a character of thanksgiving, because it recognizes that whatever I may have is in large part dependent upon the graciousness, the gifting of others, whether that be a divine other, whether that be a human other. So since you bring this up, and if I may just sort of geek out with you a little bit more, I mentioned the virtue of religio. Religio is this, just a reminder, it's the habit, taking on the character of always recognizing that we can never repay God all that is owed to God. And that's a justice matter. But there's other parts, other helper virtues for justice. One of them is piety. The word piety, pietas is the Latin. What if someone has piety, if someone has the virtue of piety, what it's saying is that they recognize that there are other people in their lives that they can never truly repay. So parents, even if you have like a nasty relationship with your parent, like my relationship with my father right now is not the best. But if I have piety, if I'm truly a pious person, I will recognize that there are gifts, that I have received something from my father that I can never truly repay. And so that's what piety is. I mean, we have a very different understanding of piety. It sort of almost has this almost puritanical kind of thing to it, but it's a part of justice in the same way that religio and gratitude is. It's just saying, I can never truly give the gift giver their due. And so I sit at a humble deficit, recognizing my relationship to other people and the way that I have received from God, from teachers, from parents, from healthcare workers, from, fill in the blank. And that gratitude sort of sits at the bottom of all these and then goes all the way through them. I try to avoid using this word because it's kind of tinged now, but there's a hierarchy of justice and then piety or religio and then piety and then eventually gratitude. But the things at the bottom actually travel all the way through so that there's no justice without gratitude. And so all of these things are deeply connected. But if justice is to give what is due, to give to one what is due, then there must be relationships where we have to recognize I can never truly, truly pay back what's due to my father, to God, to those mentors of my life. And I am being pious in the best way possible if I can say, I am the recipient of your gracious gift, and I recognize how important that gift was to me and how I will never be able to repay you the graciousness that you've given to me. I was just telling my congregation this morning, sort of unrelatedly, I will always remain pious towards them because this congregation has given me so much over the last 5 years of being here that I am always at a justice deficit with them, and I will always remain pious towards my current congregation because they are excellent and they treat me as a priest excellently. So, thank you so much for your comment. We can tease this out more of this this relational thing and this justice thing, but yeah, the relational piece is huge. Huge. What time is it? We're doing great. All right. Let's keep going. One last comment before. Okay, let's keep going because you may still have more comments when we continue. Oh no, you got one? Yeah,
Well,
go.
we have a couple.
Yeah, go please.
I was just gonna say, sometimes we don't appreciate what's given to us by somebody, until that person is deceased,
Yeah, absolutely.
like a parent, for instance, or.
And this might be that connection. This might be that connection between honor. I'm really fascinated by this. I'll do some work, and then when we honor them, that may be same thing. We may be using synonyms here. Maybe not, but yeah, great point. Sometimes someone has to leave us before, and we can feel their absence before we go, oh man, they played a huge part in my life. I'll never truly be able to repay them back. Yeah.
I didn't, when they were around.
Let's go ahead and move on. And then if you have a piece of paper, write your question down or whatever, we can always come back to it. I just have a few more things that I want to kind of get us through before next week. Oh, before, the first initial question about the national Thanksgiving. I actually have a lot of instances of Thanksgiving at a national level, which we will talk about next week when we talk about ingratitude. So just planting that seed of fascination and curiosity, a national ingratitude for next week. So you got to come back though for that. Okay. So I sort of sense that we already have a genuine, or that we're already kind of getting this sense. But like gratitude for the Christian is just not a choice. It is something that we have been commanded by God to do. So here's just 4 verses, almost cherry picked, if I'm being quite frank. But if you read through the Psalms, for example, you would get these expressions of thanksgiving from the psalmist to God regularly. But just this one from 1 Thessalonians: rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Jesus Christ. How about this? How about Psalm 9? I will praise you, O Lord, with all my heart. I will tell of all your wonderful deeds. I will be glad and rejoice in you. I will sing the praises of your name, O Most High. Hopping back to the New Testament again. And whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of Lord Jesus Christ, giving thanks to God the Father through him. And then finally, coming back to the Psalms again. Oh, come, let us sing to the Lord. Let us make a joyful noise to the rock of our salvation. Let us come into the presence with thanksgiving, right? This is such an essential part of who we are as Christians. And all the related pieces to that question. If thanksgiving is such an essential part of our life as Christians, then so is justice. Then so is the recognition that there are people that we can never repay in a pious way. Okay. So here I want to think about 2 things that I want us to think about over in the next this week in preparation for the next. So the first, gratitude is something that we as humans need to do. In fact, we are required to practice habits of gratitude as an extension of who we are as humans, but also because we have been the receivers of gifts, both divine and human and from others. We are always already in the circle of giver, gift, and gratitude, that circle of gift giving. To become better at gratitude, we need to practice gratitude. Maybe it was what we just said a minute ago. Let's make the world strange in such a way that we don't take for granted those little blessings in our lives and say thank you to them. In order to feel thankfulness in the right place, at the right time, in the right context, we need to act with gratitude so that the emotion can grow in our hearts. We need to be a people who practice gratitude even when we don't necessarily feel like it, because it is only in doing it that we start to feel it in truly the right places and at the right times. Oh, and then before we go into the discussion, one last thing to consider this morning. In light of God's gift to us of creation, what we talked about a little bit about last week, Christ's work on the cross and new creation, gifts that we have received. How do we think about giving back thanks to a God that has literally given us our very existence? The relationship between creator and creature is asymmetrical in an analogous way in the relationship between, let's say, between the parent and the child. So I'm, again, drawing upon a tradition to kind of give us an analogy of how we might think about our gifts back to God. And we're going to use this analogy of a child and a parent. And I think that this child-parent analogy is a really helpful way of thinking about this. When a young child gives a parent a gift, let's say a young child, like 2 years old or something, or 2 or 3, and they give the parent a gift of a drawing or a card that they made or a piece of artwork or something. Here, I'll turn my computer. See all my children's artwork hanging up in my office. But the child has no resources, no money, no stationery of their own outside of what the parents have provided. I provided this paper. All the crayons, right, are gifts from myself or someone else. They didn't go out and buy the pens and cards and stuff on their own. There is an inequality in the status of the child and its parent because the parent plays a double role. One, that of setting up the conditions for the child being able to give, and 2, that of receiving the gift from the child. The parent provides the paper, the pen, the card, the money on which the child puts their love and creativity into it, and basically gives these things back to the parent. The difference is that the child has given a bit of themselves back to the parent in the effort and the love of making or writing the card or drawing. And I was thinking about this as I was preparing for our time together. What if I gave my child, my 9-year-old, I have a 9-year-old son. What if I said to my son, hey, I'm going to give you this paper and I'm going to give you these crayons and I'm going to give you these materials. And what if my son just turned around and said, these are mine and I will do with them what I want. I will throw them at people. Let's say wildly misunderstanding the pens, the crayons, and doing something completely different than not only writing with them, but turning them back around and saying thank you to the person who gifted the pens and the papers and the crayons to them. Doesn't that seem like just an incredibly nasty kid? They just take, you give them these materials, and one response is to do something beautiful with them, for them to put their love into an appreciation into it and then give it back to you, thus making myself as the parent not only the provider of the gift, but also the fulfillment of the gift in gratitude in receiving it. But this other situation of the kid who just says, great, now this stuff is mine. Cool, I'm going to go do something else with it. That is kind of the inverse of this analogy that we're working with. Like, that just seems like an incredibly selfish child. Further, the gift itself has no independent value to the parent. It symbolizes the giver, therefore making the child present in the drawing, in the card, with their love. They put their love, a little bit of themselves into that. So when a person offers back to God gratitude, either through prayer, through the Eucharist, or through the stewardship of their resources to serve others within the community, God, through that person and act, is giving that gift back to God's self. Through the initial gift comes love, appreciation, and gratitude of the one offering the counter gift. The gift of the child is the symbolic delivery of itself into the receiving hands of the parent. The return is its life to them. In worship, in service, in stewardship, God receives back the gift initially given, but through the love and gratitude of the worshiper. And it is important that we, as creatures, as worshipers, give thanks to God, and that we learn the habits of life, the habits of gratitude, so that we can offer back to God the resources that God has given to us to steward in this life. All right. I'm going to open up for more discussion now. We have about 15 minutes or so. And I'm going to maybe stop sharing my screen so that my face can get really big. Okay. All right. Oh, you probably didn't see the pictures because it was screen sharing. There they are. There they are. Okay. Okay. Any follow-up questions from the virtue stuff or from this parent analogy?
We have a stunned silence on this side. Oh wait, no, we have a couple hands. Julie.
Okay.
One of the things that I struggle with gratitude, kind of in the context I get with stewardship, is if you accept that everything, including our lives, comes from God.
Yeah.
And we are, according to the virtuous line of thinking, to be grateful for all of it.
Yeah.
The good, the bad, and the ugly. But when something bad happens, or something's, makes me unhappy, I find it hard, like, what the emotion that I'm supposed to feel. Because the emotion I really feel is probably anger or something along those lines. So that's a concept embedded in all of this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you practice gratitude?
Yeah, yeah, that's an amazing question. And again, we're going to talk a little bit about that next week. But what I'll say this morning, and we actually talked about a little bit about this last week. I made reference to the Colbert clip with Anderson Cooper, I think it was. Existence is a gift. That we are is in fact a gift. And I want to speak from personal experience and from just things that I've been struggling with, is that in some cases, when there's distance, right? When there's distance from this moment to maybe something that I went through a while back, I can often say thank you to God or thank you to others for what happened. And this is hard because I don't want to excuse or give permission to people who have caused us suffering. I think that's really important to say. But often it is the case that the things I've prayed for example, I've prayed for this or for that, and they didn't come about. And on the other end of it, years later, when I've gotten some distance and said, that experience shaped me and informed me in some ways. I think for me in my life, there's been a lot of those. If hindsight being 2020, I can look back and say, man, I'm actually kind of thankful that the desire of my heart at that moment was not met, and that there was something bigger going on. Now, again, I'm going to talk a little bit more about, in some ways, the question earlier, the national ramifications of this, giving some historical examples. But I think this is my pithy answer, and I'm sorry it has to be so pithy, but the fact that we are here, that existence is a gift, that we can be here and asking the question, or not asking a question, but like going through and like, this hurts, is at some level something to be recognized. But the problem, the issue of suffering in this context is huge, and I don't want to dismiss it. So let's talk about it more next week when I'm there. We'll talk a little bit more about suffering, if that's okay. I don't want to give the pithy answer this week, if that's all right. But how do you give thanks in suffering? No, I'll leave it for next week. Yeah, sorry about that. I had a thought, but I want to make sure that I give questions. Here's the thing. Questions of suffering are not in vacuums either. And people who typically think about them and ask those sorts of questions are typically the people who have sometimes experienced those things. And so I don't like to give pithy answers to the problem of suffering. And so we'll talk about it more and in more detail next week. Sorry about that, but we'll get there, I promise.
I did see another hand in the back, but then it went to yes.
Thank you for this. Understanding what you're saying, you're describing gift as almost an economy, where you are a giver, the recognition of the gift, and a return gift, right?
Yeah.
And it's so different from the economics that we know on a daily basis, right? Which is
yes.
Everything is valued, and you put a money value to something.
Yeah.
And to be able to pay that value, you get it. And I'm wondering, how much of the way we live and the economy that we live can benefit from that idea of a gift economy. If we can see in the thing we buy more than just the value, but the person who made it, behind it.
Yeah.
How, I come from a country that produces bananas.
Yeah.
Right? So one way you can see a banana, that you buy a banana, you pay $1 for it. And that's it. That's our economy.
Yeah.
There's another way to see it, that someone grew that banana.
Yes.
And, someone's life was poured into it. So there's a gift element to the banana itself.
Yes.
We can never really exhaust, and how more grateful, how more alive we would be if we were able to see that, in the things that we buy. But I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Oh, I have so many thoughts. I have to admit that one of my research, not expertise, I think that's a little too strong, but I write about theology and economics. It's one of the things, the history of labor and like that kind of thing. And so I love this question, because this is exactly the kind of question that I was asking a couple of years ago. Lots of economists talk about gift economies and that kinds of stuff. But again, like the sort of short answer for today is that what are our economic assumptions that we go about into the marketplace with are that of transaction and not of grace. The church and the community of Christ, the small C church, like the fact that you all are sitting in a room together, that church, that when we exchange, and there's exchanges, there's the most minimally the exchanging of a shaking of hand or a hug on a Sunday morning, but there's also other forms of exchange. I'm sure in your service, I'm going to witness your service next week. I'm going to be there, but I'm sure there's all kinds of exchanges that take place. those are not exchanges of transaction. Those are exchanges of grace. And that's a huge difference because exchanges of grace recognizes the humanness of the other, the one who's providing those materials. Like you talked about, you just gave the example. I think I heard you right of like a group of people who were uh, growing bananas. Is that what you said?
That's it. Yes,
Yeah,
thanks.
banana. Right. And that someone that's not just a product, that is the outcome of one's work and love and uh, exertion. And that when there's a transaction, even a market transaction where you see the other person, that's a grace transaction, not a or not that's a grace exchange, not a transaction exchange. So this idea, okay, and then what that does is if you can change your understanding of the exchange to see the other human person, then I think thankfulness and saying thank you becomes way more obvious. That's not the right word. It becomes it becomes more obvious. If I'm just giving you a transaction exchange, gratitude is superfluous. But a human exchange of grace is much more likely to result in my genuine thanks and love to you for that exchange. Whether it's a hug, handshake, someone serving the communion table right. And so I think you're absolutely right. There's a major difference, and to reshape our way of thinking about other people, the kinds of things that we purchase, the kinds of things that we sell, the kinds of things that we do in a different kind of exchange outside of just merely worldly economic exchange is massive. I think it really transaction exchange, I think, does a detriment to our ability to see the other as human and thus to give thanks to that human. So, excellent question. You are thinking right up my alley. Yeah, great questions. Keep going.
It might be because we share a name Nat. I will put it that.
What else? Okay, well, I'm really excited. Actually at time, so this is great. I'm actually so excited to be with you all in the flesh next week. I'll worship with you, and then we'll get together. But it'll be excellent. I have no time restraints, so we can talk about this for as long as all the priests allow us to before they kick us out and lock up the building. I'm just going to be around. So what's that?
Thank you so much for today and for all of this. This has been great. This has been a lot of fun. And we're really looking forward to seeing you in person next week too.
Looking so much to seeing you all again. And yeah, it'll be really exciting. So see you in 7 days. Thank you.
Thank you.